Why do you have to do this to me, Bobby? I asked, exasperated. Bobby, sitting across from me at the folding table, tried to look innocent. It was hard to take him seriously with his spiked hair and the flashy gold and diamond grill he always wore. What do you mean, Missy Kelsey? I rolled my eyes and snorted. Cut the act, Bobby. Save it for the tourists. Born and raised in the Bronx, Bobby only used the fake accent to make tourists think they could outsmart him. I held up the pair of jeans I was inspecting. These Dolces are a disaster. The butt seam is so far off, I'd have to walk sideways. He shrugged, dropping the phony accent. I don't know, Kelsey. The shipment's just garbage this month. Must be using 6-year-olds to piece everything together or something. I can't use this stuff. Yeah, I know. He grimaced. I'm banking on some really clueless tourists. I examined a missed seam along the leg of another pair. Clueless and blind. I thought you quit doing that stuff? I'm running out of options. Besides, this isn't like 3-card Monte. It doesn't hurt those big companies. They probably won't even notice. I was getting good at justifying things to myself. I had been pretty shaken after 2 big guys called me out for cheating them out of $200 at 3-card Monte and started chasing me. Good running shoes are a must for anyone dealing 3-card Monte on the street. But the only reason I escaped was because they didn't expect a woman my size to bounce off a dumpster and clear a 10-foot fence. Spending a few years as a circus clown had its perks. The acrobatics really paid off. I'd sworn off my desperate life of crime and felt pretty good about it. That had lasted a whole 3 months. The need to eat was a serious drag on my morals. Bobby grunted and put another stack of knockoff Gucci denim on the table. You're an adult. It's your call. I've got some decent Versace here. I ignored the slight disappointment in his voice. Pot calling the kettle black and all that. I need to make some money on the resale. I gotta make the whole rent next month. Versace won't cut it. The resale value is too low. No luck finding a roommate? 2 smokers, a dog owner, and a guy who ignored the women-only note in the ad, hoping I'd come with the apartment. The building had a strict no smoking, no pets policy. As for the guy, I had an equally strict no creeps policy. That sucks, but if you decide to start trading favors for a place to stay, let me know. I can make room. He raised an eyebrow in a comical leer. Yeah, well, you let me know what Anna says about that, okay? Spoil sport. She'd keep you and kick me out. He pulled another box open and looked inside. Got some really good Chakra House jeans here. Crystal Bolt. I checked the resale shop websites on my phone. The resale value on the real thing was impressive. Between $600 and $1,000 a pair. That could work. Let me see them. He handed me the stack, and I searched for just the right pair, inspecting each one. They didn't have to be perfect, but they had to be damn close. I found a pair of rhinestone-laden jeans in size 4. These look right. He nodded. The real thing has Swarovski crystals. They did a good job with these. It'd be better if you could fit into a size 2. That'll happen. I snorted. I'm not eating enough as it is right now. That's why I can squeeze my size 6 butt into size 4. He leaned back and studied me for a moment. You are looking a little thin. The weather's been bad. I can't pull good tips in this crap. It's pretty good today. He glanced up at the sky. The last month had been nothing but a series of rainstorms. I know. I'm heading over to Times Square this afternoon, Mom. For a moment, my frustration showed through. Sorry, just a lot going on. Maybe there will be a good crowd this evening. I thought you mostly worked the park in Dumbo? I shrugged. Trying to get in some extra somewhere. It's getting late, but Times Square never closes. Not as many kids there, but maybe I can pull in some extra with the magic act. He nodded and reached under the table into his cooler, bringing out a big takeout bag. Anna gave me this to give to you, frozen orange chicken, wonton soup, and lo mein from the restaurant. She worries about you? My stomach grumbled, and we both looked at it. I think my stomach agrees. Tell her I said thanks. We haggled over the price of the rhinestone-covered jeans, along with one pair of Gucci's good enough for me to use on a switch sometime. We both knew what the price would be before we started, but some things just have to be done a certain way. Anna and Bobby might be friends, and occasionally my saviors when it came to food, but it's still Chinatown when you're buying on the street. By the time I got to my apartment, I figured I had just enough time to nuke a little lo mein in my secondhand microwave to quiet my stomach, and then get my paint on. The microwave was sitting on the counter over a couple of empty boxes in the corner of the room, remnants of Carol. She'd managed to get on with a business over in New Jersey and immediately fled with a flurry of apologies and best wishes. We'd never really been friends, but she kept her stuff picked up and paid her half of the rent on time. That's really about all anyone can ask. Saved gas. The microwave was older than I was, and I wasn't too sure it wasn't dosing me up with radiation every time I used it, but beggars can't be choosers. After eating some of the reheated lo mein, I pulled on my bodysuit, sat down at my scavenged and repaired with packaging tape vanity, pulled out my makeup tray, and turned on the mirror light. Time to put on sparkle. Face clean and dry. Check. I rubbed the white paint, a mix of zinc oxide and olive oil, all over my face and forehead down to the collarbone, and patted it to even it out, then carefully removed it from just below the bottom lip and corners of the mouth. Blue over white to highlight the eyes in powder blue. Then the red on the corners of the mouth and the lower lip. Amateur clowns often make the mistake of making the mouth red all around, but that tends to freak little kids out because all they see is a giant red kid-eating mouth. I used the bottom of a small medicine bottle to mark the cheek circles, and then put the red on those. It looks light pink over the white. Perfect. I gently patted baby powder from a sock over everything, then brushed it with a soft shaving brush to set the makeup so it could last all day. Seating the little maraschino, cherry-looking nose cap on with spirit glue, I double-checked everything. The nose cap was my lucky charm, a reminder of who I was and what it meant. Next came the false eyelashes and little highlights in warmed-up black grease pencil, soft curling lines from the corner of the eye, spraying to the cheeks. Finally, little spirit glue dots to hold silver sequins at the ends of the tiny black lines. Small as they were, they caught the light and really changed the appearance. I settled my light blue yak hair wig on and eyed myself in the mirror critically for a moment. Sparkle was perfect, exaggerated enough to work, but soft and cute enough to make kids curious and friendly. I'd had to tone it all down a bit from the circus makeup I'd used before. What works in the ring, or from a distance, can be a little much up close. The toned-down makeup also kept most of the clown's scare-me stuff away. Some people really are afraid of clowns, but a lot more pretend they are because it's a popular meme these days. Thanks to John Wayne Gacy and Stephen King, being afraid of clowns is considered funny and normal. It's still hard for a grown man to pretend to be scared of a clown when her primary look is overly cute. I felt a little like I was selling out, but the trade-off was that I could talk a lot more. A lot of circus work relies entirely on visuals, since the tops are usually too noisy to really make out dialogue. With kids, the patter wasn't as important as knowing how to paint faces or having balloons, but it'd help with the later, more adult crowd in the square. I changed my lines in Times Square, too. There were women out there wearing nothing but spike heels, thongs, and body paint. Circus clowns don't make lewd jokes, ever. But given the audience I was headed for, I could crank up all the way to Marx Brothers' suggestiveness. I love the Marx Brothers. I didn't do silent clown most of the time, but Harpo was my model for a lot of the physical stuff. My outfits were lined up on a freestanding rack. After a mouse had chewed a hole in a $600 outfit, they never went into a closet again. My clown gear wasn't Halloween costume stuff. It was professional attire for a full-time circus clown. Sighing, I realized I had more clown outfits than regular clothes. I couldn't pawn the 4 costumes or the 3 expensive wigs for anything close to what they cost or were worth. Someday, I hope to go back to a regular gig where I'd really need them. At least that's what I kept telling myself, though I was getting less convincing every day. I'd even caught myself considering just going in civilian clothes, being a street magician. But that's not who I am. I am a clown, damn it. A damn good one. I pulled on some baggy, polka-dot shin-length bloomer pants, a blue skirt, and a frilly checkered blouse and striped vest combo, then started loading my pockets. My chickens, a set of 5 small rubber chickens I'd stiffened and weighted so I could juggle them, went into one thigh pocket. Giant lollipops, my joy buzzer, a set of bulb horns, and a few other gimmicks went into various other pockets. I quickly made up a half-dozen miniature balloon animals, just in case there were some kids at the square. Calming a kid who's having a bad day can earn a $20 tip. Even if it didn't, the balloons were cheap, and it made me feel better. I perused my magic supplies. Street magic is tough because there are no distractions, no elaborate stage works, and the mark can see almost everything. I pulled a couple of regular decks of cards because you can do nearly as much with them as you can with a Svengali deck, without the risk of an amateur magician calling you out for a trick deck. Plastic safety scissors for the cut bills trick, some tissue paper in case I got a chance to pull a real Slidini paper ball trick on the right mark, and a real silver dollar for the one-coin routine. I have a whole collection of gaff tricks, but I rarely use them. It's just too easy to get caught these days. YouTube has worked hard to remove the magic from magic and turn it all into just tricks. Punchy taught me that misdirection and sleight of hand are the keys to the best close-up magic. There are unspoken rules to magic. Gimmicks fail, kids never look away, and the real magic is in the presentation. I gave myself one last long look in the mirror and headed out for Times Square. It was going to be a good day. I wasn't even on the square for 5 minutes before I was punching a mime in the mouth. There's a long-standing belief that clowns and mimes don't like each other, but I've never seen it. All the ones I know always got along fine. This mime was Boris, though, and he was a dick. A tip-stealing dick, to be specific. Nobody liked Boris. He was a formerly school-trained mime from Russia, or maybe Belarus. I'd heard both at different times, so I couldn't be sure. Somehow, a Russian National School of Theater mime had ended up a street busker in New York. He was convinced he was better than everyone else. He might actually have been, but that was probably his problem. He played complex tragedy when he'd have made more tips with the invisible box or walking against the wind routines. He also had a reputation as a thief. When the wind caught a $5 bill that had been dropped into my hat after a card trick, and it landed with the corner barely crossing the pavement line, he made a grab for it. I needed that money. I lunged over and punched him as hard as I could, just as he was straightening up, snatching the bill right out of his hand as he staggered back. "Stop, right now." I looked over my shoulder and closed my eyes in silent prayer. Brilliant move, Sparkle. I had punched him right in front of a pair of cops. The bigger cop moved between us smoothly. He was roughly the size of a building and clearly a dedicated weightlifter, so doing anything else to Boris wasn't an option. Boris was wiping blood from his mouth and nose with one hand while pointing at me and screaming a stream of what I assumed was Russian at both officers and me. I held my hands up and took a step back while the shorter cop moved to keep an eye on me. Boris tried to push around the big cop and was promptly spun around, pushed up against a building, and cuffed. That seemed to take the air out of him. I stayed as still as possible. A group of middle-aged women, several drinks into the evening, were ogling the big cop, almost drooling. I overheard one of them, a woman in a red dress, make a loud and somewhat carnivorous comment about his butt. He obviously heard it too, but ignored it. He was a pretty damn good-looking guy, so he'd probably heard a few drunk comments before. "Look, you're not really being arrested here, just detained until we sort this out," the big cop said as he handed Boris off to his partner and turned to face me. He had that bored, bureaucratic tone that tells you this may be a horrible moment for you, but it's just another day for him. I nodded, knowing not to antagonize the police. I glanced at the crowd around us. It was a pity they were only stopping to see the scuffle. I wished I could draw a crowd like that myself. Then Genesius smiled on me. Or at least that's who I assumed it was. Punchy had told me that St. Genesius was the patron saint of clowns. He's also the patron saint of lawyers, which I find kind of disturbing. In the same bored tone as before, the big cop announced, "I'm going to have to search you, just to make sure you don't have any weapons. I won't cuff you if you cooperate." Sending a silent prayer of thanks, I slowly and deliberately turned my head to catch the eyes of the group of middle-aged women who'd been eyeing him so appreciatively. I looked up at him, then very slowly reached up and gently poked his huge bicep with one finger. I looked back at the group of women, raised my eyebrows as high as I could, and fanned myself dramatically while fluttering my eyelashes. "Oh, officer, if you must, you must!" The woman in red laughed loudly, a brash braying sound that triggered a cascade of laughter through the crowd. She was perfect. There's always one person with a contagious laugh, the one who can cause everyone else to laugh. He was so focused on the process that he totally missed the crowd's reaction. Just turn around and spread your legs a little more than shoulder width. "So, what's your name, officer?" "Sorensen." "No, your first name. We're getting pretty personal here." "Bjorn. Dear God, thank you." I let my mouth drop open and waggled my eyebrows at the crowd. "Of course it is. Ooh, I so love this dream." I slowly turned and put my hands on one of the security bollards. Maybe turn isn't the right word. Executing a ballet turn in huge red clown shoes is a perfect clown move. Combining exaggerated precision and grace with the absurd can be strikingly funny. I also made sure I was facing the crowd. My perfect straight man of a cop missed that. He just shook his head. Smartass. I popped my butt back at him and smirked widely at the crowd. He noticed. The woman in red and her posse erupted in laughter, causing another blast of glee from the crowd. The cop glanced at the crowd for a second. "Do you have anything on you I should know about? Weapons, needles, sharp objects?" I did my best to project mock, wide-eyed naivety. "Not that I know of, officer, but you should take your time and look really, really carefully." The crowd was laughing continuously at this point, so all it did was turn the volume up a bit. Still, it was at that point my police officer finally realized he was playing the straight man in this game, but there wasn't much he could do about it. He sighed. "Let's get this done." It was time to prime the pump. I made a sad face at the clutch of women and glanced down at my hat. "Looks like I might be headed to the Hooskow girls." A 20 fluttered from one of their hands into my hat. "Bail money." As he ran his hands up my legs, I gave a loud, breathless sigh. "If you're doing this for the city, that's fine. But if you're doing it for me, go just a little bit slower." That sent the crowd into high gear. The first thing he found were the rubber chickens. He looked them over and then held them up wordlessly. I shrugged. Those are my emotional support animals. Cards, plastic safety scissors, juggling balls, tissue paper, and my silver dollar were all discovered to fluttering eyelashes and double entendres that kept the crowd in a giving mood. When you're on, you're on. A rain of bills fell into the hat with each wisecrack or strange discovery. He tried not to feed me any more straight lines than necessary, but he couldn't help himself when he found the clutch of giant lollipops. "Why on earth do you need 6 of these?" I looked over my shoulder at him for a second with a huge grin, then looked back at the press of people with a slow wink and a touch of one finger to the side of my face. "My therapist says I have an oral fixation." Even he finally laughed at that one, though it was hard to hear over the crowd's reaction. He started to back off, and I realized I had one more gag, but it would only work if he played along. "You missed a pocket." "Really?" "Yep." He gave a quiet, resigned sigh. "Where is it?" "Right hip." I wiggled exaggeratedly. As the people laughed, I whispered to him, "Red handkerchief." It is the classic clown gag. Unless you were raised under a rock in Antarctica, there's no way you don't know what's going to happen when you pull on a clown's handkerchief. He played along, pulling the chain of silk handkerchiefs out steadily, while I played it up, focusing on the women who'd led the rain of money. "Right there, oh yeah, right there, almost." He stopped for a second as the handkerchief suddenly stopped coming. because I'd pushed my hip against the bollard, pinning the end. I rolled my eyes dramatically and panted. "Just a little harder." He pulled, and I let it go with the loudest squeal I could muster. His arm went straight up with the end of the chain of handkerchiefs, displaying the red lace thong at the end. With a dramatic sigh, I crossed my eyes, stuck my tongue out of the corner of my mouth, and melted down in a classic boneless comic faint, ending on my back with a huge grin, pretending to try to hold my beating heart into my chest with one hand while the other draped dramatically across my eyes. "Does anyone have a cigarette?" The crowd exploded in laughter, louder than I'd heard since the circus closed. It was that breathtaking rush I'd always loved. I closed my eyes and just let it all wash over me until it faded, and the cop nudged me. I let my eyes flutter open. "Hello?" He looked down at me with an amused look in his eyes. "Okay, you've had your fun." He glanced over at the tip hat. "And made a lot of money." I gave a helpless shrug and reached my hand up to let him pull me to my feet. "Sorry, but there was no way I could pass that up." The crowd was already thinning as people realized the show was pretty much over. He smiled a little and shook his head. "Hell of a way to make a living." "Me or you? I'm not the one searching clowns on a Friday night, you know." "Both." He chuckled, a nice, warm, low sound. His partner wandered over. "Boris over there says he'll drop the assault charge if she forgets about his attempted misappropriation of funds." I didn't have to think about it long. There was a lot of money in the hat, probably enough to make rent, but I couldn't use it for rent if I had to use it to make bail or pay a fine. That works for me. Bjorn and his partner nodded to each other, and the partner wandered back to where Boris was waiting, still in cuffs. It seemed Bjorn's partner was a bit more risk-averse than he was. "Rather not do the paperwork on this one. You'd both get fined, and I'd spend all evening doing paperwork over a $5 bill and a bruised nose." "Thanks." I picked up the tip hat and looked inside, seeing more $20 bills than I'd seen in months. He shook his head. "Let's not make a habit of this." "Really? I was thinking you and me could do a matinee on Sunday." I wiggled my eyebrows at him. "I don't think Boris would cooperate." I shrugged. "We could get a stand-in mime. Most people can't tell them apart anyway." I finished gathering up my take, rubber banding it together in neat packs. I noticed people looking up as a rumble of thunder managed to break over the sounds of people and cars. They hurried their pace, so there was no point in trying to pull in a few more dollars tonight. "I appreciate it, but I don't think so. Stay out of trouble." He turned and walked over to where his partner was still talking to Boris. The woman in red had it right. That was not a bad view at all. The man definitely didn't skip leg day. He'd neatly stacked my props, so it was no trouble to get them all pocketed up again, except for the handkerchief line. That took some work to get packed correctly, so I just balled it up and dropped it into one of my larger pockets. Later, at the apartment, I counted $593.37. That was the best take I'd had in a single day, ever. Not crazy, sell the house and move to Monaco money, but damn, I should have seriously tried to get the big cop on board instead of joking about it. I checked the counterfeit jeans one last time before I put them on. They looked good, and I would be able to switch them out for the real thing as long as I was careful. It wasn't the highest risk scam. All I had to do was wear them into the ritzy boutique, swap them for a real pair, and walk out. Then I'd wear the jeans for a little while, take them to a high-end resale shop, and walk out with at least $600. Desperation kept the little bit of guilt I had at bay. I knew I was rationalizing, but insurance would make up the loss, assuming the shop didn't just sell the knockoff anyway. Besides, the same little kid in Malaysia probably made both pairs. Technically, it was grand larceny, with the jeans marked at well over $2,000, but if I did get caught, any lawyer, even the public defender, could plead it down to petty larceny. For a first-time offense, anyway. It was illegal, it was shoplifting, but I kept telling myself that it didn't hurt anyone directly, and it kept me from doing riskier stuff like three-card Monte, or worse yet, buying into the nastier cons. I just wasn't ready to pull pigeon drops on little old ladies yet. As for playing in the higher-end stuff, the big cons, well, that wasn't something I liked to do much for other reasons. The big cons could get you killed, not just by the marks either. Confidence men usually avoid violence as a rule, but there's a price for everything. I'd played an extra in a couple out of sheer desperation, but it was a terrible idea. Rumor had it that in a couple of high-end cons, some of the extras, the low-level players like me, had disappeared, much to the inconvenience of law enforcement. Getting dumped in a landfill in a garbage bag wasn't on my bucket list. Punchy, our old boss clown, and his wife Lulabelle had been deep in the con game for years, until Punchy got a stint upstate, and they decided to pivot to clowning. They never looked back. Kids were their joy, though Lulabelle couldn't have any of her own. When the circus folded, it hit them hard. They taught me what they could, worried about me silently, hoping for better choices. I'd scouted Silver weeks before, among other high-end shops. No security tags. It offended the wealthy customers. The staff focused on luxury bags, not $2,000 jeans. Silver's marketing was subtle. No name, just a silver slash on black. They catered to the ultra-rich, not tourists. Checking my makeup. It wasn't clown white this time, the best I could scavenge. Rich women leave behind tons of makeup. Hotel housekeepers hook me up. My kit, worth $20,000 retail, cost me nothing. Perfume, different story. Sample strips in baggies, a hint of luxury to blend in. I looked the part, now, to swap the knockoff jeans for real ones without getting caught. Lulabelle had drilled me on every detail of the switch and skip, a maneuver she'd perfected over years. Donning my vintage t-shirt, a Chinatown knockoff of Vote for Pedro, and the jeans, I knew they'd pass muster. Even if they spotted the knockoffs, they'd likely write it off as ironic, whatever that meant to them. I completed the ensemble with a small clutch, convincing Fendi sunglasses and knockoff Gucci sandals. Nothing substantial, just enough to blend in and not raise suspicion. Silver was the ideal spot. The sales staff wore outfits worth more than I earned in a month, yet they were accustomed to wealthy customers who flaunted their wealth or didn't care. The tiny purse was key. It couldn't hold more than a couple of cards, making me virtually harmless in their eyes amidst clients who spent fortunes on a whim. Entering the store, I exuded the perfect blend of, I'm rich, but I don't care. The salesgirls barely glanced my way, focused on patrons dropping platinum cards for mortgage-sized purchases in plastic bags. Commission-driven, they had little time for someone like me, browsing through jeans that seemed merely ridiculously expensive compared to the couture handbags being pawed over. Feigning boredom, I tried on a couple of pairs of Secret Circus jeans before turning my attention to the Chakra House display. I gasped in frustration, almost audibly. Crystal Bolt blue jeans in sizes 0, 2, a single token pair in size 8. None in the sizes I needed. I needed to steer clear of silver for a while. Returning too soon would raise suspicions among the salesgirls, who had sharp memories. As two of them were occupied with a customer, I spotted exactly what I needed on the counter near the sleek black register stand. A lone pair of Crystal Bolt jeans in size 4. It struck me as odd they hadn't been restocked, but I understood the limitations of the staff's attention. Executing the switch was a deliberate exercise in patience. I took extra time to ensure it appeared effortless, transferring the tags seamlessly. Once done, I casually placed the knockoffs back on the display without drawing any undue attention. A junior salesgirl intercepted me, clutching an expensive plastic purse that likely cost a small fortune. She hesitated, torn between watching her potential commission and not offending a potential customer. "Excuse me?" I smiled disarmingly, sparing her the dilemma of addressing me formally. "I came in to inquire about the new 7 for All Mankind jeans." She looked apologetic. "They aren't due until next Monday." "Oh, I must have gotten the date wrong. Thank you," I replied, subtly reaffirming my presence for a legitimate reason before smoothly exiting the store. Outside, I focused on maintaining my composure. deliberately calming my nerves as I strolled down the street. The jeans felt exquisite against my skin, tempting me for a moment to keep them, but the potential resale price equated to a month's rent and more. A practical reminder of why I couldn't indulge in such luxuries. Still, those jeans definitely accentuated my rear end. Adorned with half a chandelier's worth of Swarovski crystals, they had a way of making almost anything look stunning. A few blocks later, I began to relax. I felt like I was in the clear now. Even if they somehow caught wind of what I'd done, proving theft without a serial number like some designer purses had would be nearly impossible. All I needed to do was wear the jeans on and off for a few weeks to give them that worn-in appearance, and let any unlikely police interest fade away. As I made my way back home, I noticed storm clouds gathering, reinforcing my decision to stay indoors rather than risk getting caught in bad weather while trying to earn a few bucks. Besides, I had promised Punchy and Lulabelle I'd join them at the neighborhood street festival tomorrow. A charitable event, as I understood it. For me, it was a chance to let Sparkle have some fun, entertaining kids without the pressure of earning money. Clown Alley came into view. "Hey, Sparkle!" I finished tying a balloon poodle and handed it down to a delighted toddler. She giggled and gave it a little kiss before prancing off. "Punchy, any balloons left I can borrow? I'm almost out. I've gone through over 100 already." Punchy glanced down the street. Down to just a couple, and everyone's packing up. He was right. Most stands and tables were folding down around us. I climbed up and perched on a stanchion. Good timing. I'm wiped out. I don't think I could do another handstand if my life depended on it. Punchy chuckled, adjusting his nose. "Managing all right out there?" I shrugged. Busking Times Square, the park in Dumbo. It's a hustle to make rent and eat, but I've had some decent luck lately. He scanned the surroundings with a deceptive laziness, but I could read the caution in Punchy's eyes. "You into anything?" "A little switch and skip, high-end blue jeans, nothing serious." "What did I tell you about serious?" I know, it's all serious to someone, but really they spend more on air freshener daily than what I'm walking out with." "You be careful, Kelsey. Rich people don't stay rich by being nice." I scowled. Punchy calling me Kelsey while we were in character never sat right. He knew that. "I know. I'm only doing it because my roommate moved out, and I had to cover the whole rent. It's a slippery path, it really is. You know I started as a ducky boy. Lulabelle was one too. Got into plenty of gang fights. Duckies were like clowns. Mess with one, and it's, 'Hey, Rube.' They're all there, you know? But it got ugly. We got older, got out, tried to stay straight. But money ran short. We dipped into little cons." Punchy sighed, his giant black hobo clown boot digging into the asphalt. "Next thing you know, you're in the bigs. And the stakes? Well, they go up with the rewards. Rikers sucks, believe me." He exhaled heavily and shook his head. "Lulabelle and I were lucky. Guys we knew got popped. One buddy conned some Sicilian grandma. They never found his head or his limbs. Another pulled a job on a protected shop in Irishtown, Vinegar Hill back then." Punchy looked at me, his expression haunted. "They took him to a metal shop, burned off all his fingers with a blowtorch. Let him live, just to send a message to everyone else." I felt a chill. That was then. This is now. People don't do that kind of thing anymore, Punchy. I wasn't entirely convinced by my own words. "Don't you believe it, Sparkle? People don't change. They just hide things better now, that's all." Punchy stared at the ground, waves of sorrow emanating from him. "I think we did you wrong, teaching you the grift. Thought it was all history, like teaching someone sword fighting nowadays. Never thought you'd end up using it." "I'm playing it safe as I can. Barely doing anything right now," I assured Punchy, twisting my mouth in concern. "Winter's coming in a couple of months, and that's got me a little worried. Follow the sun, Sparkle. Lulabelle and me, we're leaving soon, heading south. Maybe a month or two." "Gibtown?" I asked, knowing the allure of Gibsonton, a town synonymous with circus life. He smiled wistfully at the name. "We haven't exactly ironed out the details. But who knows? We know some people there from the old days. Could be Gibtown, could be the Keys." He snapped back to reality. "What about you, Sparkle? What's your plan?" I sighed. I don't know. I keep hoping for a miracle. Ever think about Vegas? It's not right for me. I'm not cut out for it. He smiled a genuine smile, filled with pride. It caught me off guard. You're right. You're not cut out for Vegas. You know why? He didn't wait for an answer. You're the real thing, Sparkle. A real honest-to-God clown. You don't give a damn about the money. You live on the laughter. I've seen you, in the Dumbo. I watched you pass up a chance for a good hat to make a little kid smile. I struggled to maintain a straight face, knowing he spoke the truth. So I'm a terrible businesswoman, but an amazing clown, all the way to the bone. It'll happen for you, Sparkle. Just keep looking. Well, I'll be working Times Square again tomorrow, so it will have to come find me. He nodded thoughtfully. I can get you on with that agency in Vegas if it doesn't. Bones owes me a favor or two. It had been a good day, rounding off a decent week. I was pulling in enough from my performances to feel optimistic. Coming out today had been worth it, despite the threatening rain. Halfway through my set, I noticed Bobby Chan lingering at the edge of the crowd. He kept glancing around cautiously, nearly throwing me off my routine as I tried to figure out what he was up to, but I managed to hold it together. As I finished up, gathering my props and counting my hat, which held just over $200, Bobby approached and pretended to study a store display as he spoke in a low voice. What are you into, Kelsey? Nothing you don't know about. Why? I replied cautiously. The Ivans are looking for you. They came through Chinatown asking who knew you. I don't even know who that is. Big Ivan and Little Ivan. They're strong-arm guys. Rumor says they're Russian mafia. Are you holding out on them or something? Nobody takes a percentage on the square. This isn't the 1950s. I paused, the realization hitting me. Wait, this is about Boris. I punched him a few days ago. The mime you punched was Boris? That kind of makes sense. Bobby grinned. Seriously, though, leg breakers over a bloody nose and a 5-spot? Who knows? He might be related to one of them. Bobby shrugged, then his expression hardened. Shit. Over by the corner. I followed his gaze. 2 men, clad in black jeans and shirts, were heading straight toward us. Both had pale skin and dark hair, looking almost like twins, if not for their stark differences in size. Bobby, go. I urged him quietly. A clown couldn't exactly blend into the background, especially not in Times Square, but Bobby could at least distance himself from me. I doubted these guys would do more than threaten. Seemingly on the same page, Bobby strolled away nonchalantly, not giving a second glance back. I braced myself as the men approached. There was no point in running. They already knew I was here, but, strangely, as they drew nearer, it was as if they couldn't quite see me amidst the bustling crowd. They were mere feet away, scanning the area, still oblivious to my presence. My nerves were on edge when suddenly a massive shadow enveloped me. How's the crowd today? A deep voice asked. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, mixed with a flutter of something else in response to this striking man who exuded strength and a hint of cedar. I turned to face him, unable to contain my smile. Officer, are you going to handcuff me this time? Some of that was banter, but honestly, what red-blooded American girl wouldn't consider it? Damn that 50 Shades thing. I would, but I have a feeling you'd just slip out of them anyway. He grinned down at me, and behind him I could see the Ivans passing by, apparently oblivious to my presence. Probably, but it'd be fun while it lasted. He chuckled. I'm sure it would. I watched as the Ivans slowly swept the other side of the square. I can promise you wouldn't go running around once you've been down with a clown. He gave a deep rumbling laugh. I know my laughs, and that was the laugh of a guy who has a sense of humor and enjoys life. My breath caught. Every girl has a weakness. Thank God for grease paint, or he'd have seen me flush red from head to toe. Irrepressible, he said it fondly, with a touch of something that I couldn't quite grasp in words, but that set my damn hormones percolating. He hadn't said anything overt, hadn't so much as eyed me. Hell, I was literally in a clown suit. But Something in his voice made me certain he'd love to see how much of me was blushing. I glanced down at his left hand. No ring. So, I kinda owe you for letting me get away with murder the other day. Any chance I can buy you a hot dog? He shook his head. Not on duty. I probably should have shrugged and dropped it. But, in my defense, he smelled like a lumberjack. In a really good way. So, if you were off duty, when and where would I run into you? He studied me for a moment. I might be at Elwood's Hot Dogs by the Botanical Gardens around 1 tomorrow. I met his gaze squarely. You know, that's funny. The gardens are open tomorrow, so I might just happen to be there too. What a coincidence, right? He chuckled again. I really liked that laugh. The walk around. By the next morning, I found myself wavering on the whole hot dog at the Botanical Garden plan. I mean, I didn't know the guy at all, and I generally felt nervous around cops. But I had extended the invitation, and running into him again seemed inevitable, so a hot dog in a public place should be safe enough. I arrived at Elwood's right at 1 o'clock and immediately spotted him. Not that it was hard. He stood head and shoulders above the crowd. What surprised me was how quickly he noticed me. People didn't usually pay much attention to Kelsey. They noticed Sparkle, and he had only seen me as Sparkle. He smiled, and I blinked. Civvies today? I shook off my surprise and grinned back. Incognito. That's how invasions start, you know? One day, nothing. The next, clowns everywhere. I pulled the nose cap out of my pocket and held it up. Emergency clown gear. He chuckled again. His laugh had a way of making my knees a little weak. The world could use more clowns. My knees got a lot wobbly. So, what should I call you? Your placard said Sparkle. I suppose I could stick with that. It suits you. My undercover name is Kelsey, and I'm buying. I invited you. Sort of. Sort of, but close enough. I ordered a couple of drinks and foot-long hot dogs with all the fixings for us, and we strolled along. It was the perfect, no-pressure sort of date. You know, you never asked for my ID. Yeah, Boris is undocumented, and there was no reason to turn a 5-minute thing into 4 hours of paperwork when he's just going to be released again anyway. So, how did you know it was me? He finished a bite of his hot dog. The way you move, it's toned down when you're in your civvies, but there's something familiar about it. You've got a bounce. Reminds me of... He paused, then looked down at me with a half grin. You talk like Groucho, but move like Harpo. Damn, my knees nearly gave out entirely. I couldn't help myself. I slipped into a full Groucho walk, holding my hot dog like a cigar and wiggling my eyebrows. On safari this morning, I shot an elephant in my pajamas. How he got in my pajamas, I'll never know. That rumbling laugh hit me again. It's like Sparkle the Clown is the real you, and Kelsey is the costume. I almost stumbled right into him, but managed to cover it up with a skip. The guy was seriously throwing off my equilibrium. We walked through a large swath of the garden, chatting about nothing in particular. We both subtly communicated that we weren't looking for anything serious. Me, because I aimed to get back with a circus. Him, because he was relocating to San Diego in a month or so. Still, he genuinely enjoyed my jokes, even the corny old ones. I discovered he'd grown up in Michigan, specifically the UP, which explained his distinct non-New York accent, though it had mellowed into a flat Midwestern tone. It also explained that rugged lumberjack vibe he exuded. I definitely savored the envious stares from passing women. Time flew faster than expected, and much faster than I wanted. I had invited him out to keep close to a cop while the Ivans were in the square, but it had turned out to be the best kind of sort of date I'd ever experienced. We wound up at the duck pond, and I felt reality creeping back in. Bjorn picked up on it instantly. Everything all right? Just thinking. I know a guy who used to be a ducky boy. I stared into the water. Wow. Bjorn nodded slowly, gazing down into the water as well. I've heard stories. He glanced around. They're supposed to be long gone now, but... He shrugged. They say there was never just one ducky. If you picked a fight with one, you fought them all. That's what gave them real power. Schools would close just on the rumor that they were coming. That's what he said. Bjorn looked thoughtfully around. You have to kind of respect that. They knew they could depend on each other. We strolled back to Easterbrook's, a bit quieter now. Hey, any chance you'd be interested in going for a drink and a meal on Saturday? Maybe. I can't believe I'm about to have a drink in a cop bar wearing stolen $2,000 blue jeans, I muttered to myself as I stepped into McKenna's tavern. The place fit every stereotype. An Irish name, a clean-cut crowd with short hair, and not a man bun in sight. And all this near a police precinct in New York City. It couldn't have been more obvious if they'd hung a neon badge over the bar. And despite my nerves, I didn't have a chance to escape. Bjorn spotted me immediately. Over here, he called out, waving me over to a rough-cut oak table where he sat with two other guys. He stood up and pulled out a sturdy chair for me to sit in. He introduced the men. This is Smitty, he said, gesturing to the guy across from him, and this guy is Dave. I smiled politely. My nerves churned inside like a thieving cat surrounded by police dogs. I'm Kelsey. Smitty had a friendly face, weathered from years under the sun, and Dave had the intense eyes of someone who didn't miss much. I felt Bjorn's steady gaze on me, reassuring and warm despite the situation. Bjorn leaned forward. You've met Smitty before? He said casually, catching me off guard. I glanced at Smitty, who nodded knowingly. Yeah, I remember you, he said with a hint of a grin. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. It's good to see you again. Dave leaned forward now, his eyes sharp. Bjorn tells us you've got some trouble with a couple of guys looking for you. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. Yeah, the Ivans, I think they're after me because of something that happened recently. Bjorn interjected, his voice calm and measured. We heard about the incident with Boris. Yeah, I admitted, feeling a flush of embarrassment. I may have punched him. Smitty let out a low chuckle. From what I hear, he probably deserved it. Bjorn nodded in agreement. He's been known to ruffle feathers, but the Ivans are different. They're not just looking to rough you up. They're connected. Dave's expression hardened. Russian mafia. Big Ivan and Little Ivan Ad. My heart sank. So, what do I do? Bjorn leaned back, his expression thoughtful. For now, you stick with us. They won't try anything here, not with the precinct a stone's throw away. And we'll figure out what they want and how serious they are. I exhaled slowly, feeling a glimmer of relief amidst the tension. Thank you. I appreciate it. Bjorn smiled reassuringly. We look after our own, Kelsey. I nodded gratefully, feeling a wave of gratitude toward this unexpected alliance. Maybe, just maybe, wearing stolen jeans into a cop bar wasn't such a disaster after all. I took a sip of ale and chuckled. Close, but not quite. Smitty leaned back, thinking. Acrobat? I raised my eyebrows, getting warmer. He smirked, realizing he was on the right track. Aerialist. I nodded, impressed. Bingo. Dave looked intrigued. Aerialist? Like trapeze stuff? Yeah, exactly, I confirmed, feeling a sense of relief that the guessing game was over. Bjorn beamed proudly. She's one of the best. You should see her up there. Smitty nodded, now understanding Bjorn's earlier enthusiasm. No wonder you don't blend in with the 9-to-5ers. The waitress Yona chimed in with a smile. I knew it. That grace and those muscles. Only an aerialist. I grinned, feeling a surge of camaraderie. Thanks, Yona. Dave seemed genuinely interested. How did you get into that? I shrugged, recalling my journey. Started when I was a kid, really. Always loved climbing things. Ended up joining a circus. Bjorn chuckled, sipping his ale. That's our Sparkle. Can't keep her feet on the ground. I laughed, feeling at ease with this unexpected group. Guilty as charged. The conversation flowed naturally from there, swapping stories and jokes as the afternoon wore on. I felt a warmth I hadn't expected, sitting among these cops who, despite their tough exterior, seemed genuinely interested in my world. As the hours passed and the bar filled with patrons coming off duty or just looking for a good time, I realized something surprising. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't worried about the Ivans or my next rent payment. Here, in this cop bar with its century-old traditions and hearty meals, I felt safe and strangely at home. Maybe, just maybe, I had stumbled upon something more than just a hot dog invite. I leaned forward, a mischievous grin spreading across my face. I'm an aerialist. Smitty's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Aerialist? Like trapeze stuff? Yeah, exactly, I confirmed, feeling relieved to finally reveal it. Bjorn nodded proudly. She's one of the best. You should see her up there. Smitty turned to me with newfound interest. How did you get into that? I shrugged, reflecting on my journey. Started when I was a kid. Always loved climbing things. Ended up joining a circus. Bjorn chuckled, sipping his ale. That's our Sparkle. Can't keep her feet on the ground. I laughed, feeling a sense of camaraderie. Guilty as charged. The conversation flowed naturally from there, swapping stories and jokes as the afternoon wore on. Sitting among these cops who, despite their tough exterior, seemed genuinely interested in my world, I felt unexpectedly at ease. As the bar filled with patrons coming off duty or just looking for a good time, I realized something surprising. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't worried about the Ivans or my next rent payment. Here, in this cop bar with its century-old traditions and hearty meals, I felt safe and strangely at home. Maybe, just maybe, I had stumbled upon something more than just a hot dog invite. The laughter rippled through the bar, echoing off the walls as I continued my playful charade, tapping the table with each feigned distraction. Even Bjorn couldn't contain himself, his laughter infectious and filling the air around us. Okay, Smitty finally managed between chuckles, wiping tears from his eyes. I give up. What's the hustle? I couldn't resist drawing it out a little longer, keeping up the routine. I'm an aerialist, I finally revealed, sliding my nose cap back into my pocket with a flourish. Aerialist? Seriously? Smitty's eyebrows shot up in genuine surprise. Bjorn nodded proudly. She's amazing up there. You should see her perform. Dave leaned forward, intrigued. How did you get into that? I shrugged, feeling more at ease with each passing moment. Started climbing things as a kid. Ended up joining a circus. Bjorn chuckled, taking a sip of his ale. That's our Sparkle, always reaching for the sky. I grinned, feeling a sense of camaraderie with these officers. The tension I'd felt walking into the bar had evaporated completely, replaced by a warmth that was entirely unexpected. As the conversation shifted to stories and banter, I realized I'd found something unexpected in this quaint cop bar. Acceptance, laughter, and a reminder that sometimes the most surprising connections are the ones we stumble upon when we least expect them. She's really, really good at it, the waitress chimed in, steadying herself on a nearby chair. By now, Smitty was thoroughly puzzled, glancing around at the other tables where laughter and whispers had erupted. Sensing the opportunity, I shot sly winks to the nearest tables, amplifying the amusement. When Smitty turned back to me, I paused for a dramatic effect, lowering my arm and meeting his gaze directly. I'd think it would be as clear. I tilted my head slightly, raising an eyebrow. As the nose on my face. He blinked in disbelief. How the hell? Laughter swelled into a chorus around us. The waitress straightened up and called out to the bartender. Charlie! He responded crisply. Aye, Mary? She pointed dramatically upwards, her voice carrying through the bar. I'm calling Mary's Grace. 1 round on the house, and this one... She rested a hand on my shoulder. Eats and drinks for free tonight. The patrons erupted into cheers and chants of Mary's Grace. I steadied myself on the table, overwhelmed by the moment. Can't lose the audience, or look ungrateful, though. With a deep breath, I rose from my chair, stepped up onto the seat, then confidently onto the backrest. The sturdy chair supported my weight effortlessly, a testament to its craftsmanship. Dave looked startled, but Bjorn remained calm, trusting my skill. With grace and poise, I bowed 3 times to the applauding crowd before gracefully descending back into my seat. The applause was warm and appreciative, fueled by the promise of free beer, but it felt genuinely gratifying nonetheless. Smitty shook his head slowly. A clown, a real one. Serious training for that kind of stuff. Circus? I nodded, a smile playing on my lips. Yeah, but I'm grounded here for a while. He leaned forward, genuinely curious. Seriously, how the hell did you do the nose thing? Misdirection, mostly. Some sleight of hand, I explained, my enthusiasm bubbling over. It's a variation of the old Slidini paperball trick. Works like a charm on the target, while everyone else sees exactly what's happening. Smitty nodded thoughtfully. That's the key, knowing your audience. Yeah, I agreed, relieved he understood. It's all about reading the room. Thankfully, this crowd was perfect for it. Dave chuckled, nodding in agreement. Cops appreciate a good laugh, even if it's at our own expense. Bjorn interjected, squeezing my hand proudly. I warned you guys. Underestimating her was a mistake. As he started to withdraw his hand, I impulsively squeezed it back before letting go. The residual laughter and applause made my heart swell with joy, like a firework about to burst. We lingered longer than intended, indulging in hearty food, beer, and whiskey. I reveled in being myself, performing magic tricks and jokes. With Mary's blessing, I even demonstrated a handstand on the chair's backrest. Throughout it all, Bjorn's gaze remained fixed on me. Our table soon attracted a crowd of 30 or more people. It wasn't a circus-sized audience, but the warmth of their applause and laughter seeped deep into my bones. Exiting the tavern, hand in hand with Bjorn, I couldn't contain my excitement. I glanced up at him. So, where do you live? About a block that way, he pointed casually. Perfect, I grinned mischievously, because dragging you back to my place would waste at least half an hour. We arrived at his building, and Bjorn seemed hesitant, starting to voice his concerns. Look, Kelsey, are you sure? But before he could finish, I sprung up, wrapped my legs around his waist, and kissed him passionately. Everyone has that something that makes them ecstatic and wild, that sends them soaring, and I had experienced a full evening of it. I wasn't holding back at all. For a moment, Bjorn had to steady me against the entrance door while he fumbled for his keycard and swiped us in. I woke up snugly wrapped around him. The sound of heavy rain outside and the soft dim light suggested it wasn't just a passing shower. I secretly hoped he didn't have early plans because I was perfectly content right where I was. I hadn't exactly requested a formal tour, but from what I remembered and could see, his one-bedroom apartment was much nicer than the shared apartment I had been in. Not expansive, of course, but tidy, well-organized, and everything in it hinted at a man between relationships rather than a perpetual bachelor. Peering through the bedroom door, I spotted a small beer brewing project on a side table. I sensed him stirring, and I turned my head to catch him gazing at me. Planning to sneak away? Leave behind a giant red shoe? The legend of Clownderella, he teased back. After his wondrous visit to the circus, poor Prince Charming roams the kingdom, desperately seeking his true love with that red shoe. He sighed dramatically. It's said to be the tragic fate of those who love a clown too deeply. I chuckled, reveling in his infectious laughter. Glancing around, he asked, So, do I pass inspection? We didn't trip over pizza boxes and empty beer bottles on our way in, I quipped, flashing him a playful smile. I waged an all-out war with cockroaches the size of cars in my first city apartment. Never want to do that again, he confessed. Been there, done that, I commiserated. Bjorn ran a hand along my shoulder. For someone so petite, you're all muscle. I have to stay in shape. Physical gags in the circus can be risky. So, why did you become a clown? Family tradition? He asked, his tone gentle and curious. Nestling in closer, I pondered his question. I had rehearsed the usual answers, the witty responses, all my life. But in that moment, amidst the warmth and safety, I felt no need for pretense, especially not with him. I had a friend growing up named Lisa. She lived down the street, and we were inseparable. We were the terrible twosome of 10th Street until about 5th grade. Bjorn remained silent, encouraging me to continue. She got cancer, I continued after a pause, my voice tinged with sorrow. At first, it didn't seem to change much, but over time, she started to fade away. I can't explain it. Every day there was less of Lisa there. She became thinner, weaker, unable to do the things we used to enjoy. Her hair fell out, her eyes lost their sparkle, and she stopped laughing or smiling altogether. I swallowed hard, my emotions catching in my throat. I tried to visit her, to be there for her, but she wasn't the same fun-loving friend anymore. She spent most of her time sitting in a chair or lying in bed, hardly ropey speaking. There was this medicine smell that hung in the air, seeped into everything. I hated that smell. Eventually, I stopped going over to her house. Bjorn's arms tightened around me, his support silent but strong. I hadn't seen her in weeks, maybe months, when I received an invitation to her birthday party. I didn't want to go, but my mom insisted. I brought her a book about horses, something she loved. It was all she could really enjoy by then. I sniffed, the memory still raw. He waited patiently, his presence a comforting anchor. I was the only guest. She didn't even want a party, but her mom made her invite me. There was no cake or ice cream. Even those smells made her sick. We sat quietly, and she thanked me for the book while her mom played some soft music. I remember her mom looking so tired, so hollow. She seemed empty. Then this birthday party clown showed up. He was clearly meant for little kids, not a couple of 11-year-old girls. He wasn't a professional, just a guy trying to earn some extra money. His makeup was all wrong. His tricks were clumsy. Tears continued to stream down my cheeks, dripping onto Bjorn's arm. Great way to make an impression. But it worked, I managed, my voice thick with emotion. He did this terrible pratfall, so amateurish. But Lisa started giggling and then laughing, really laughing. And soon we were both laughing and crying at the same time. It had been so long since I'd seen her laugh. It hurt. Bjorn gently ran his fingers through my hair, silently urging me to continue. I waited 2 days, borrowed my mom's makeup, bought a mop head from the drugstore, and dyed it blue with food coloring. That's when Sparkle was born. I put on the makeup, the wig, and some ridiculous clothes, and just walked into her house like I used to. I made up this silly show about training stuffed animals and tried to juggle some eggs. I snorted weakly. It made a mess, but it made her laugh. I did it every chance I got, after school, on weekends, just to hear her laugh. It made me feel, I don't know, like a superhero. I'm sure she loved it, Bjorn murmured, his voice heavy with empathy. He already sensed where the story was heading. She did, I whispered back. I kept it up for about 6 months, until it became clear there was no cure. She passed away in her sleep, but I had managed to make her laugh that day. Bjorn kissed the top of my head tenderly. You're truly amazing. After that, nothing else felt right. Punchy, the boss clown from the circus, used to say once you're a real clown, you can't really be anything else inside. That's how it was for me. I knew who I was. I drove my teachers crazy. Imagine being a teacher and your class clown, sometimes showing up in full white-face clown makeup. Did you get in trouble a lot? His question was gentle, encouraging me to continue sharing. I did until one of the football coaches asked if I could do some gags during halftime shows. It was a hit, and football was a huge deal at the school, so after that, nobody gave me any trouble at all. They even put Sparkle on the cheerleading squad. Not Kelsey, Sparkle. So then it was off to clown school? Bjorn paused, looking thoughtful. Is there such a thing as clown school? There are several, actually. I have a degree in performing arts from the Circus Arts Academy. He shifted to peer down at me. Really? Yep. Pantomime, aerial arts, acrobatics, magic, directing, script writing. I grinned up at him. Knife throwing. Bjorn chuckled. Note to self, never make a clown angry. You better believe it. How did you end up here? The circus went bankrupt, and a bunch of us were kind of stranded here. Some had savings from the previous season, but many of us didn't. Not enough to get by, anyway. That's tough. Most of them have secondary skills or side gigs to fall back on. Jojo and Boots work as paramedics. Bitsy got a job at a bakery. This might be good for her, since she's always loved baking, and her cakes are amazing. Punchy and Lulabelle are teaching physical comedy at one of the theaters. And you? I'm a clown. I can't do any of that. Not really. I've picked up some neat skills along the way, and maybe some of them could be turned into a job, but if I stopped putting on the paint and making people laugh, I'd just wither away and die. I slumped a bit. I know that sounds silly. He shook his head. No, it doesn't. I never thought about it before, but clowns are artists, aren't they? A warm feeling washed over me. He understood. I hadn't really encountered anyone outside my world who did. Some of us, maybe most of us. I decided to shift the topic. So, why are you leaving? A sardonic snort escaped him. You know those movies where the cop does the right thing, ticks off a bunch of politicians, and ends up in trouble? Yeah. I glanced up at him. What did you do? I arrested an 18-year-old for DUI. She already had a suspended license, so it snowballed. Then she resisted arrest, bit me and my partner, and smashed the side window of our cruiser when we took her in. He stretched, and I nestled against him again. Turns out her dad is a bigwig in city administration. She could have easily pled it down to next to nothing, but she denied everything. That sounds familiar. Oh, I remember now, Diana something or other, right? That whole prisoner of privilege saga? He chuckled. Diana Desmond, yes. She made herself a public target with some of her press statements about how being rich was harder than being poor. She should try being broke sometime. Yeah, well, she put the prosecutor in an impossible position, caught between the party hacks and public outrage. The body cam footage was accidentally leaked in an attempt to pressure her into a plea deal to make it all go away, or maybe to convince the judge to rule it inadmissible. But it backfired either way. Once it was out there, it couldn't just disappear. Then her high-priced defense attorney put her on the stand. I saw her press interviews before the trial. I bet that didn't go well. You could say that. She was the most self-centered, unsympathetic person I've ever seen. I know they coached her on what to say and how to act. They always do. But she threw it all out the window and went on a rant that offended pretty much everyone in the room. Her lawyer couldn't get her to shut up. She was found guilty, ended up with 2 years suspended for assault on peace officers, but got 30 days in jail for the DUI. She didn't enjoy that, did she? He shook his head. She was in jail for all of 2 weeks before she really pissed off a bunch of the other prisoners. Ended up doing the rest of her stay in the infirmary. Lost 4 teeth, got her nose broken along with some fractured ribs. Ouch! Somehow this was all my fault, so all my old evaluations start mysteriously losing points. My civil service exam for sergeant disappears in the system. I'm suddenly dismissed from investigation duties. Finally, my union rep comes over and just tells me that I'm done. They want blood for her suffering. My partner saw the writing on the wall early and jumped to Miami, so I'm pretty much the only good target. The union knows it isn't fair, but they don't need another war with the city administration. It was pretty obvious I was going to have to leave New York if I was going to have a career. I even lost my girlfriend. Once the course was clear, she took a position with Coco Chanel in Paris. I winced. Secretly, I wasn't too upset over the lost girlfriend. That really sucks. Yeah, but the union did what they could. They helped me find the private security job I'm taking. It's out in San Diego. Lisa's mom moved to San Diego after she died. I visited her a couple of times when I had the chance. How is she doing? She works for a cancer charity now. I don't remember which one. She seemed really happy the last time I saw her. That had been almost 2 years ago now, I realized. I should give her a call sometime. I bet she loves to hear from you. I think she does. I felt pretty guilty for not calling her a lot more. He caught it, I could tell, but he didn't say anything. I decided to change the subject. So, your ex-girlfriend is a fashion designer? Desiree is a model. Way to walk into a wall, Kelsey. I very much wanted to flee what light there was and crawl under the bed to hide. A model, really? Bjorn caught the change in my demeanor immediately. We both knew we were never going to be a long-term thing. He shook his head. She acted like she was allergic to carbs. I don't think I ever saw her eat real food. Any woman I've got a future with has to be able to drink a beer or two. It took us another 2 hours to get out of bed. We'd burned off a lot of those carbs by then. Tacky, unrefined, utterly tasteless. This place is so perfect. I squeezed Bjorn's hand tightly, fearing I might float away like a helium balloon if I let go. The scent of popcorn, hot dogs, and cotton candy wafted through the air. A unicyclist zoomed past us, clad only in neon green Speedos and a yellow cape. Bjorn kept stealing glances at me, struggling to contain a smile that wanted to burst forth. We'd strolled miles along the boardwalk, immersing ourselves in the vibrant atmosphere, stopping at every quirky stand and oddball shop. It felt as close to being in a circus as I'd been since getting stranded. Laughter and shouts from kids playing on the beach filled my ears, and I soaked it all in. We paused to watch. So, you've pretty much got the laughter thing figured out, huh? I said, breaking the momentary silence. He nodded, his smile broadening. A clown who craves laughter. It's not the hardest puzzle to solve. I used to wonder if it was about attention, but it's more than that, isn't it? A bit, I admitted, watching a little girl in a blue swimsuit giggling as she darted away from an incoming wave. I love the rush of applause and the attention, sure, but I could live without all that. If you're going to be addicted to something, laughter seems like a pretty good choice, he remarked, looking down at me thoughtfully. I read somewhere that comedians are often some of the unhappiest people, but that doesn't seem to fit you. No, it doesn't, I agreed, thinking of some of the clowns I'd met who struggled with inner demons. For me, it's all tied to Lisa and why I became a clown. Or maybe realized I was a clown is more accurate. You're lucky, you know, he said softly. You've found something you truly love doing, something inherently good. That's hard to beat. I smiled at him, but inside I grumbled at my luck. Just when I'd found someone who truly understood and accepted me, quirks and all, he was a cop about to move across the country. Still, we had a bit of time left, and he was a fantastic friend with benefits. So I decided to make the most of those benefits while I still could. Little did I know how little time that would be. Stars and Stripes forever. Still riding the high of the extended weekend, I had been so energized that I performed in Dumbo and Times Square 3 days in a row. Every spare moment was spent with Bjorn, knowing our time together was limited. I had even left my best outfits, both sets, at his place, and he had entrusted me with a copy of his apartment security card. Trust came easier to him, being a cop with connections. On the third day, just as I finished up at Times Square, I spotted the Ivans against. This time, their gaze was fixed squarely on me, moving with purpose. Clown shoes may look cumbersome at first glance. My first pair, fashioned from my dad's old army boots when I was 11, certainly had been. They were clunky, painted bright red, and stuffed with extra socks. But professional clown shoes are designed for action, acrobatics, tumbling, aerial acts, jumping, vaulting. They had to be perfect for all of it. As I sprinted away from them, I stole a glance back to see the shock on their faces. They halted in their tracks, glaring. If they had watched my performances closely, they should have known better. They had seen me execute one-handed handstands and hands-free backflips. Why would they think I couldn't sprint? I dashed straight to my apartment, racing up the stairs. The Ivans were lagging behind, giving me a narrow window to grab what I needed and flee. I planned to sweep my clothes off the shelves and rack, but the door swung open easily at my touch. It shouldn't have. The damage around the locks indicated it had been kicked in. Cautiously, I stepped inside, The place was too small for anyone to hide, revealing that the intruders had long departed. However, they had left chaos in their wake. My apartment was a disaster zone. Clothes strewn across the floor, shelves emptied, and my stash of tricks and props scattered everywhere. I hurriedly stuffed a few bags with my clown suits and wigs, salvaging what was still intact amidst the broken items. Having started with so little made it easier. 4 blocks away, I slowed to a walk, mulling over my situation. This had to stop. The Ivans were after me because of Boris, over a petty fight about a bloody nose and $5. I needed Boris to call them off. As much as nobody liked him, everyone knew him. His real name was Ilyich, but Boris was the name everyone used. It was easier, and nobody cared enough about him to use his real name. Surprisingly, Boris lived only 8 blocks from my apartment, in an even shabbier, more dilapidated building infested with cockroaches. There was no way I was bringing what little I salvaged into that place. Instead, I decided to drop everything off at Bjorn's and change into something less conspicuous. By the time I reached Bjorn's place, dusk was settling in, warning me that it would soon be too dark to visit Boris's place safely. It wasn't a prospect I relished, especially after dark. Bjorn would be off shift in less than half an hour. Despite my anger towards Boris and the adrenaline rush from escaping the Ivans, I couldn't shake the need to talk to him. I grinned mischievously. Hell, it would have happened sooner or later anyway. I heard Bjorn enter the apartment. There was a long pause. Then he called out, Kelsey? Not today, I called back from his bedroom. He snorted, and in the dresser mirror I could just see him still near his front door, picking up a pair of polka-dotted bloomers. He followed the trail I'd left for him, stepping over a striped vest and then a checkered blouse. Leaning around the corner of the bedroom doorway, he raised one eyebrow. Well, this is interesting. I gave him my most serious look. Look, we both knew this was going to happen sooner or later. He stepped in and began unbuttoning his shirt. Well, it really had to, didn't it, Sparkle? He glanced at me as he slid his shirt off. Nothing but your makeup and wig. He burst into laughter as I threw the rest of the blankets off. And my big red shoes. The next morning, feeling more than a little pleased with myself and very pleased with Bjorn, I lingered in his apartment for a while after he left for work. He hadn't blinked an eye when I told him my apartment had some maintenance issues and asked if I could stay a couple of nights. I decided I needed to head over to Boris's place and have a chat with him. Hell, I'd even give him the $5 if I had to. I started rummaging through my rescued clothes, pulling out everything I had salvaged. Amidst the pile, I stumbled upon a birthday card from Lisa's mom that had somehow found its way to me months ago. It had a note saying, "Call me," but I'd always found excuses not to, like my phone not being paid up enough. The truth was, I felt like a fraud whenever I talked to her. She thought I was a better person than I really was. Going through the bags, I realized I had left all my jeans at my place. The only pairs I had were my 2 best ones I had initially left at Bjorn's, and one of those was likely to be sold off soon. I shrugged and pulled them on. Boris's place turned out to be even worse than I had anticipated from the address. It was squalid, reeking of urine, rotting carpet, and a hint of something worse. Boris could have improved his situation by flipping burgers. I pounded on his door, the sound echoing through the grimy hallway. It took 3 solid knocks before a heavily accented voice called out from inside. Boris answered the door to his dimly lit apartment, holding his head like he was nursing a hangover. He squinted at me suspiciously. "Boris, we need to talk," I announced, pushing past him into the cramped space. Immediately, regret washed over me as I took in the squalor around me. I had seen cleaner landfills. "Who are you? And what do you want?" Boris demanded, backing away nervously. He was dressed in nothing but a torn t-shirt and stained boxers. "I'm Kelsey, and I began, but he cut me off abruptly. No, you leave now. I want nothing to do with you," Boris insisted. his voice trembling with agitation. "Look, just call off the Ivans." He dropped his hand from the side of his face and let out a bitter laugh. "Me? Call off the Ivans? They're Russian mafia, killers. Are you out of your mind?" He shook his head incredulously. "You need to go, now!" As he moved into a spot where the tattered curtains allowed a sliver of light through, I saw the extent of his injuries. His left eye was swollen shut, his lip gruesomely split, and his nose clearly broken. "What happened to you? Who did this?" I asked, my concern evident. He managed a painful, wheezing chuckle. "The Ivans. They heard I know someone named Kelsey, but I don't. They think I'm lying. Still, they do this." He gestured to his battered face. "Because that's what they do, even when they're wrong." Realization struck me like a bolt. Boris didn't recognize me without my clown makeup. The Ivans, however, knew I was a clown. They had seen my costumes in the apartment. Weakly, Boris pushed me towards the door. "You have to leave. If the Ivans find out you were here, they'll think I'm lying, and they'll kill me." He paused, his eyes filled with a profound sadness. "And for a pretty girl like you, they'll do much worse before they kill you. That's how they operate." I backed away swiftly, feeling nauseous and terrified. I practically sprinted to Bjorn's place, stopping on the stairs to catch my breath. Trembling, I pulled out my security card. I needed to leave, to get out of here as fast as I could. Reaching for the door handle, I caught my reflection in the glass. I was unnaturally pale, stress etched deeply into my features. Lines I hadn't noticed before seemed etched into my face. Blinking, I leaned closer and realized they weren't just lines. They were rows of scratches, carved into the door. Running my fingertips along the scratched glass, a sense of dread washed over me, as though I were teetering on the edge of a precipice. Glass shouldn't have scratches like these. Bjorn had held me against that door with my legs around his waist, right there. Swarovski crystals don't scratch glass. Shaking off my shock, I jammed the card into the reader and raced up the stairs, slamming the door shut behind me and latching it firmly. I hurriedly stripped out of the crystal bolt jeans, holding them up and staring at the back pockets where several crystals were as large as my thumbnail. Nervously, I grabbed an empty beer bottle from Bjorn's project table and muttered a prayer. Dragging it across the pocket of the jeans, I instantly felt what was happening. Thin, etched lines appeared on the bottle, confirming my worst fears. Swarovski crystals don't scratch glass. Diamonds do. Panic surged through me. Vegas. I needed to take Punchy's offer. Disappear into Vegas. Maybe perform street magic or assist with big shows. Punchy could arrange it. I had to vanish. But first, I'd have to say goodbye to Bjorn, to Punchy, Lulabelle, and the whole crew. Bobby and Anna. I needed to warn them. They'd already been asking about me. I tried calling Bobby, but he didn't pick up. 2 more attempts yielded nothing. Desperate for something to ground me, to steady my racing thoughts, I remembered the card from Lisa's mom. I glanced wryly at my phone. Calling Lisa's mom was always difficult. I never knew quite what to say, feeling like a fraud because she held me in such high regard. She'd asked me to come to Lisa's funeral in my clown gear. She'd even called my parents and convinced them. Mom had bought me a real blue wig just for the funeral. I'd felt the stares of her extended family the whole time. But when she delivered her eulogy, she talked about me and how much Lisa had depended on me every day. After the funeral, dozens of family members came over to express their gratitude, and all I could think of was how I'd deserted her until that birthday. I picked up the phone twice before taking a deep breath and dialing. It rang twice before she answered. Laura Richmond. "Hey, Mrs. Richmond, it's Sparkle." I couldn't help but smile. Lisa's mom had never called me anything but Sparkle after the first day I showed up in that goofy mop-head wig. "I'm so glad to hear from you, honey. I tried to call, but your phone kept saying it was disconnected." I lost my phone and had to get a new one." It was actually disconnected due to a few missed payments, and I'd switched to the pay-by-the-minute phone I had now, which rarely had minutes for the same reason. Are you still with the circus? No, I'm kind of between gigs right now. I have a lead on a job, though. There was a pause on the other end. Oh, I was kind of hoping you'd be looking for an off-season job. I leaned back. Why? Well, I know this might be too much, but we've been looking into emotional support therapies for some of our children. Support dogs and her voice caught, on the verge of tears. I can't forget how... Her words choked off. You want me to help? A tear escaped, tracing down my cheek. It wouldn't be a huge amount of money, but it'd be enough to live on, and you could do so much for them. Her words rushed out in a desperate plea, and I knew I would have agreed even if the circus were still running, even if it didn't pay anything. I closed my eyes. When do you need me? We should have started this years ago. I told the board about you as part of the emotional therapies pitch. You're the reason I know how important it is. She took a deep breath. Not just for the children either. What you did for Lisa kept me afloat sometimes. It was getting so hard, and nobody seemed to be in it with us anymore. We were so alone. I thought about how empty and hollow she'd looked the day of the birthday party, and felt a fresh rush of guilt at abandoning them. She continued, and I wasn't sure if she was even talking to me anymore. Then one little blue-haired clown showed up and kept showing up over and over again every day, making her smile and laugh, even on the worst days. You have no idea how much that meant, and still means to me. I choked on a sob, wanting to tell her I wasn't the angel she was picturing, but I couldn't make myself talk. She took a second to get herself under control. At least think about it. Please. I don't have to. I'll get out there as soon as I can. I tried to call Bobby again to warn him, but nobody answered his cell, so I finally called Anna's family's restaurant. I kept getting Anna's not here over and over until her mother finally came on the line. She's with Bobby. He's at the hospital. He's been hurt. I thought she sounded stressed, but it was hard to tell. I managed to convince them to tell me which hospital. It didn't take a genius to realize that it probably wasn't a coincidence. And even though I hoped for a case of food poisoning or a traffic accident, I wasn't as surprised to see that Bobby had been beaten badly. Both eyes swollen shut, oxygen tubes, IVs. I was kind of prepared for it. I wasn't prepared for Anna. She hadn't been beaten. Her eyes weren't swollen shut. It was the anger in her eyes that took me by surprise. You did this! I shook my head. No, I didn't. She stuck a finger in my face, tears streaming out of her eyes. They told me. You stole from them. I swear, Anna, I didn't know. You didn't know. Her face twisted in rage. They said they'll kill him then. She shuddered. I'm pregnant, Kelsey. I couldn't let them do that to me. Our baby. She suddenly slumped, crying hard. I reached out to her, but she pushed my hand away. I told them where to find you. I told them where your apartment was. I pulled back in shock, and she looked up at me hard-eyed. You brought this on everyone. They told me that if I see you, I need to tell you. You call them, or they find everyone you know and do what they did to Bobby. Only it will get worse each time. So, monsieur, she shoved a piece of paper at me and looked down, her voice dead, barely above a whisper. You have to call them, Kelsey. She looked over at Bobby's still form on the bed, and the sound of the machinery filled the room for a moment. He'll be okay this time. There's some bleeding on the brain, but they said... She stopped and started crying softly. I reached out to her, touched her shoulder, and for a moment, she let me. Then she pushed my hand away and turned silently toward Bobby. I left the hospital, the piece of paper in my hand feeling like it weighed 100 pounds. I ended up sitting by the duck pond, trying to figure out what to do. I knew I had a way out. It would be easy. I could escape. I could just disappear. But the Ivans would just keep looking, keep hurting anyone they thought I cared about until they found me. They had all the time in the world. Sooner or later, they'd track down the others, my friends. It would only get worse. I knew little about diamonds, but those blue jeans had to be worth millions. They'd never give up. I entertained fantasies of confronting them, But even if I could devise a plan and summon the courage, the Ivans were mere pawns for their organization, whether Russian mafia or some other shadowy force. They likely had entire teams of enforcers at their disposal. From every angle, it seemed everyone would be better off if I simply ceased to exist. Except me. Across the duck pond, a surly kid scowled at the world before vanishing into the crowd. He reminded me of Punchy, back in the day when he was one of the feared Ducky Boys. Punchy had always warned me about the risks, cautioned me not to take things lightly. Now, I needed to warn him and everyone else. Summoning resolve, I set off towards Punchy and Lulabelle's place, preparing myself for the imminent loss of my circus family. 3 hours later, in a room filled with faces I once thought would be my friends for life, I finished recounting my story and sank back, overwhelmed with misery. All of this because of a pair of stolen jeans. Bobby was in the hospital, Anna despised me, and everyone around me was potentially in danger. Punchy sighed heavily, and I braced myself for the impending bad news. He exchanged a glance with Lulabelle. "Okay, that's a hey Rube if I ever heard one." His eyes scanned the room of silent clowns. "Where can we find a Geiger counter?" I slipped into Bjorn's apartment and settled at his sturdy wooden table, tracing my fingers along its surface. It felt so much like him. Retrieving the note from my pocket, I read it over again. It's never easy to tell someone you're leaving, especially if it's someone you don't want to leave behind. I didn't have a choice, and I needed Bjorn to understand that. He needed to know I was doing this to protect others from harm. I wanted him to know I hoped to see him again, but ultimately, it would be up to him. Placing something I hoped would hold significance for him atop the note, I left the apartment. Glancing back one last time, I felt like I was stepping off a precipice. Charivari. My stomach churned as I staggered into the bistro. It was deserted except for the Ivans, who eyed me with disdain from their central table. Approaching them, I fought to steady my breath, feeling my insides twist in knots. The absence of any other patrons indicated what was to come. There were no witnesses. This told me everything. I could barely keep my balance. With trembling hands, I lifted the shopping bag. "It's here. I'll just give it to you, and, The smaller Ivan smirked, or perhaps sneered would be more accurate. I realized he was deriving pleasure from this, reveling in tormenting those defenseless against him. He noticed my cold sweat and clammy skin, relishing the fear he instilled, knowing there was nothing I could do about it. "I don't think so. We've been inconvenienced. Too many people know, and we need to set an example." Before I could process a single thought, the door behind me burst open with a forceful slam. "Freeze!" Two men dressed in dark suits swept into the room with swift, practiced movements, each wielding a large automatic weapon aimed squarely at me. I twisted around to face them, but my legs buckled beneath me. Collapsing in a huddled heap, I clutched my stomach in agony. One of the agents crouched beside me. "It's her!" His partner glanced from him to the Ivans, quickly flashing a badge. "Homeland Security, stay right where you are." He spoke into a radio handset. "Sir, we've confirmed her identity. We've apprehended her." Waving his partner back, he ordered, "Step away from her." "I think," the agent beside me began, "you're not paid to think." An authoritative older man entered, accompanied by two paramedics and a woman clad in what resembled a bright yellow spacesuit. "Give her space," the older man instructed, gesturing for the woman to approach. "Scanner." I tasted warm fluid in my mouth and coughed it out, the agent beside me recoiling at the sight of blood splattered on the tile floor. "Damn it!" A crackling sound filled the air as the woman in the spacesuit moved closer. A yellow box emitting waves of noise that grew louder with each pass over me and the shopping bag. "This is it. Radiation levels are off the charts." She removed a peculiar yellow backpack adorned with a large, unmistakable red radiation hazard symbol and placed the shopping bag inside. "Idiot!" The older man shook his head. She didn't know. As I retched again, the paramedics approached cautiously. The larger one glanced back at the woman in the spacesuit. Is this safe? The stuff is in the bag. Everything on her is residual. I wouldn't give her a hug and kiss, but you should be okay, the paramedic informed the Homeland Security agents. My eyes welled with tears as he gently rolled me onto my back. Eyes are full of blood. His voice trembled as he assessed my condition, relaying statistics to his partner. Christ, this isn't good. The woman in yellow leaned over us briefly. She might have a couple of hours, but that's optimistic. What a goddamn mess, the senior agent in charge muttered, glancing over at the Ivans. You know her? No, she just walked in and kind of fell down, the smaller Ivan replied, eyeing the agent suspiciously. Who are you? Senior agent in charge, Brogan, Homeland Security. We've been chasing her for weeks. Our sensors picked up a radiation spike at a port of entry. Been tracking her across the city with radiation detectors, Brogan explained. She's a terrorist? The Ivan asked incredulously. Don't think so. Likely part of a smuggling ring. We've seen cases where radiation is used to enhance diamonds, but this is extreme. She's carrying highly radioactive material, Brogan replied grimly. She didn't give you anything, did she? Both Ivans vehemently shook their heads. The woman in yellow scanned them. They're clean, no residual radiation. She's gray, the smaller Ivan observed, intrigued. Sweats, pallor, all symptoms, Brogan confirmed. We need to keep this under wraps. If news gets out, it'll tank the diamond market. I need contact information in case my superiors want to speak with you. I coughed, splattering blood on the paramedic's shirt. Brogan snapped at his team. Get the stretcher now. The larger Ivan leaned in, cautiously observing. So she's... The senior agent shook his head grimly. She's pretty far gone. Coughing blood. That means the respiratory system is almost done. If we can get her to the hospital before the seizures start, you can at least ask... The larger paramedic attempted to stabilize me, but my body convulsed, fighting against their efforts. Fuck! She's flatlining! Get her on the damn... The smaller paramedic's voice cracked with urgency. It's too damn late. Through tear-blurred vision, I saw the Ivan staring in horrified fascination as I was strapped onto the stretcher and rushed out of the scene. The blow-off. As soon as the ambulance came to a stop, I sat up and discreetly spit out the blood capsule. Did they buy it? Punchy, shedding his disguise as Senior Agent Brogan, chuckled while removing his false nose. Every damn bit of it. Nobody's going to convince them you didn't die of radiation poisoning right in front of them. He handed me a sandwich. Eat that. The effects are probably wearing off, but this will help. I nibbled on the sandwich cautiously, feeling my stomach settle and the chills fade away. What the hell did you give me? Doxycycline. It's an antibiotic used for malaria. It's pretty safe, but the one thing you don't do is take it on an empty stomach. Cold sweats, stomach cramps, chills. Makes you look and feel like death warmed over. You can't fake feeling that bad. You're sure they bought it? Punchy snorted. They're Russians. Paranoia is in their DNA. They'd sooner believe a secret government conspiracy cover-up than anything else. If they ask around and can't find any record of what happened, well, that just confirms what they want to believe. I pulled out some wet wipes and cleaned off the residue from the raw onion juice I had used to make my eyes red and watery. Jojo walked around from the front of the ambulance, peeling off his bloody shirt, adorned with fake station patches, and shook his head. Get your butt out of the rig, Sparkle. We gotta get this thing cleaned and back to the station house before anyone starts to wonder why maintenance is taking so long with it. Lulabelle approached, lugging the Geiger counter. Good thing those idiots didn't know the difference between a biohazard suit and a radiation suit. You'll need this, Jojo. He nodded. We'll get it back in the locker. Where are the test pads? I retrieved one of the test pads from my jacket, and Lulabelle pulled out the other from the pocket of the diamond-studded jeans. Jojo gathered them all up and started packing everything into cases while I slid out of the ambulance. Punchy examined the jeans thoughtfully. It'll take a while to move these. Diamonds this size are a bit touchy if you want a good price. I still have a contact in one of the merchant houses. He owes me a couple of favors. Probably reset it all in old settings and claim their heirlooms. I trust you, Punchy. Just make sure half of whatever my share is gets to Bobby and Anna when you can. I will. It's time for an exit strategy. Everyone is scattering. Sorry, I didn't mean to cause all this. He gave a tight half smile. Everyone needed a nudge, Sparkle. We were getting stale here. Now everyone will have seed money to start fresh. Jojo and Boots are heading to Vegas. Lulabelle and I are retiring to Florida for good. You still set on the West Coast? I have to be. A woman I know mentioned me to some people out there who might be interested. I might just get back to being a real clown. You'll never be anything else, Sparkle. It isn't in the paint, you know. I smiled, though tears threatened. Yeah, I remember. It's in the heart. He smiled back, a touch sadly. Make 'em laugh, kid. A little girl eyed me cautiously, and I gave her my warmest smile, scrunching my nose. It worked like magic. She giggled. Her mom studied me, trying to figure out my angle. Did you lose some kind of bet? Not yet. I think I'm going to win this one. I thought you had to dress up as a clown. I tilted my head. I'm not dressed up as a clown. I am one. I'm a full-time medical clown. I work at hospitals in the children's wards. They have those. The pay is better than you think, and the perks of being a clown are amazing. Huh. Winking at the little girl, I produced a carnation from thin air. I glanced at her mom. Do you mind? She shrugged and nodded, trying to appear unsurprised, though I could tell she was just as taken aback as her daughter by the sudden appearance of the flower. I gracefully knelt in front of the girl and offered her the flower. She giggled. Where's your other shoe? I'm hoping it's on the plane. Why would it be on the plane? My boyfriend has it, or at least he's supposed to. She gazed at the gate thoughtfully. I hope he remembers. Me too. Is he a clown too? No, but I like him a lot anyway. We're waiting for my mommy's boyfriend. He's not a clown, is he? No, he's a banker. The little girl wrinkled her nose, and her mother subtly adjusted her stance. That's a neat job, isn't it? She gave me a small frown. I guess. Our conversation was interrupted by a sudden surge of people emerging from the gate. A well-dressed man in an expensive suit power-walked ahead of the crowd and gave the woman a quick kiss. Long flight. I'll grab my suitcase and we'll get out of here. He headed towards the baggage carousel without looking back. The little girl squealed, I see your shoe. Following her gaze, I spotted Bjorn towering above the crowd, holding my other red clown shoe high above his head. I glanced at the little girl. Thank you. I might not have seen him without your help. She giggled. With 3 bounding steps, I reached Bjorn and jumped into his arms. He caught me effortlessly, holding me close. I kissed him and nestled against his chest. Missed ya. I missed you too. Lift your foot, Clownderella. I raised my foot and he slipped on my shoe. He nodded seriously. I had to make sure I had the right girl. Do you encounter many clowns missing a shoe? You'd be surprised. He paused. You know this is crazy, right? I can't believe you convinced me to move in together. We hardly know each other. Crazy is kind of my thing. I am a clown. If it didn't work out, we could always go our separate ways. But I had a feeling... Bjorn voiced it. I just have a strange feeling it's going to work out just fine. That earned him another kiss. Bye! The little girl stood right in front of us, holding her mom's hand while the banker walked by, engrossed in his cell phone. The mom's expression was one of complete shock. Her mouth was even hanging open a bit. Clearly, Bjorn was not what she had been expecting. I waved to the little girl, Bye. Then I winked at her mom and pointed slowly at Bjorn's chest. Told you there were perks.